and I wasn't willing to accept that. So I quit. And when I quit, it was a very difficult time in my life that I'll spare you the details, but man, fuck show business. It was tough. And then one day I was in Panama City, Panama, and I was at a hotel, and I looked at the lobby. There was a painting of Abraham Lincoln. And then I would look closer. It wasn't a painting. It was all pennies, just pennies, on a black canvas arranged into the face of Abraham Lincoln. And I asked the guy, I said, how much is that painting worth? He said, $600,000, sir. And I looked at the pennies that made up the painting, and I was like, that's like $300 worth of pennies. A light bulb went in my head. I realized the value of art. Some of the biggest wars and crimes and scandals in history were financed through the theft of art. Art is a powerful commodity. And artists, if you're good at it, should never behave as a commodity. That's a tough one. And then I gave up. I said, this is probably it. I accepted the fact that the career I thought I was gonna have was over, but I started to rediscover just my art for its own sake. I would go to comedy clubs, and I worked for way less money than I ever had, and I enjoyed it more than any of the work I ever did. It was probably the best work I'll ever do, because it was so honest. It was so sincere. There was no media, there was no studio, there was no scrutiny, just me and the crowds. And I did it night after night, and slowly but surely the crowds got bigger and bigger. And then suddenly people started to notice, and Polestar would say, Dave Chappelle has the tour of the year. And again, and then the year after that, and then the year after that. People kind of like me. Oh, this guy, he's pretty funny. Time magazine released an article about Bill Cosby. The headline said, 50 funny and filthy rich. And I read that article, and it was when I was looking at his face before all that disgrace that I looked and I said, I could do that. I told my father, and my father said, well, then just do it. That's why I wouldn't even know where to start. And he said, well, look in the phone book. It's before the internet, if you're young. We used to have a book with phone numbers in it of. My father found for me the local comedy club in Washington, D.C. I called him. I found out when open mic night was, and I started to go there on Tuesday nights, just watch. And then one night I went on a weekend. I would get my money together, and I would go to this comedy club, and I would just watch these comedians, and sometimes they would talk to me. And I told one of the comedians after a show one night, I said, man, I really want to try to do this. And he said, well, he said, if you want to be a good comedian, you should know how to act. I said, why? And he says, he didn't explain it. I said, okay, and I told my parents, and this is how I came to find out about Duke Ellington, my mother. She said, there's a place you can go where you can learn to act right here in Washington. It's a high school. I said, you mean I would get out of Eastern? After I did Lorne Michaels, after I did Saturday Night Live, Lorne Michaels said something that I got to share with you. He goes, you went to Peggy Caford School, didn't you? That's what he said. And I said, I did. And he said, I want to say that Saturday Night Live, he goes, tell her I owe her money. I never asked to have this theater named after me. Peggy asked me. She was ailing, and I went to her house to visit her. She said, I want you to put your name on the school. She said, it will help us raise money for the school. And to me, it was like, I felt like I'm a little young for that, and I'm still kind of using the name, you know what I mean? Let's see what I do with it first, you never know, Like, imagine if OJ named his son OJ Jr. Oh, Dad. And around then, I was receiving the Mark Twain Prize, huge honor. And the next day, all the artists that came to honor me, the Bradley Coopers and Chris Tuckers and all these great people, came to Ellington, and they taught master classes for the students. And Peggy Cooper Capritz, as sick as she was, got out of her bed so she could be with her babies. She never left us. So I did it. Say, you know, whatever you want to do, however I can help, I'll do it. I got to tell you, if you quit a show like Chappelle's show, I don't know if you know what happens to you professionally, but I'll tell you what doesn't happen. They don't just say, well, good luck in your future endeavors. With that media, they beat me up. With their power, they tried to make me behave. It takes a strong person to stand out in the cold like that. And I swear to God, so much of the strength I got to do that, the inner warmth I got to do that, I learned in this school and from my friends who helped raise me. So why wouldn't I do anything I could to help my benefactor? And the last time I came back, after the closer, when the kids were mad at me, I gotta tell you, that was quite the day. All the kids were screaming and yelling. I remember I said to the kids, I go, well, okay, well, what do you guys think I did wrong? And a line formed. These kids said everything about gender and this and that and the other, but they didn't say anything about art. And this is my biggest gripe with this whole controversy with the closer, that you cannot report on an artist's work and remove artistic nuance from his words. It would be like if you were reading a newspaper and they say, man shot in the face by a 6-foot rabbit, expected to survive. You'd be like, oh my God. And they never tell you it's a Bugs Bunny cartoon. I took a lot of cold shots in show business. And I gotta tell you, as the years go on, you feel the shots less and less as just a business, is what you say. But that one, that day, boy, that day they hurt me. When I heard those talking points coming out of these children's faces, that really, sincerely hurt me. Because I know those kids didn't come up with those words. I've heard those words before. The more you say I can't say something, the more urgent it is for me to say it. And it has nothing to do with what you're saying I can't say. It has everything to do with my right, my freedom of artistic expression that is valuable to me, that is not separate from me. It's worth protecting for me, and it's worth protecting for everyone else who endeavors in our noble, noble professions. And these kids didn't understand that they were instruments of oppression. And I didn't get mad at them. They're kids, they're freshmen, they're not ready yet. They don't know. What made me mad, and I am this petty, I ain't saying names. One of the kids' mother went on Fox News. And she used to be a student here. I remember her face, but I don't know if she was particularly popular. Anyway. She was in the literary media arts department. She said a lot of things that I didn't like, a lot of things, but, you know, that's her right. Things she said that got to me. She said, at Duke Ellington, that theater was a sanctuary for students. I used to sit there and meditate. Well, of course you'd meditate. You were a literary media arts student. We didn't meditate in here, we got to work. But okay, fine. I would sit in there and meditate, she said. And then she scrunched her face up. She's a beautiful woman, but her face looked hideous the way she scrunched it up. And she said, and just to imagine his name on that theater. How could you do that to those kids? Listen, no matter what they said about The Closer, it was still the most watched special in the world. And I am still of the mind, and I say this with all humility, it is a masterpiece, and I challenge all my peers to make its equal. They cannot. I am sure. It will be decades before you ever see someone in my genre as proficient as me. I am maybe a once-in-a-lifetime talent. I am telling you the truth.
Wait. Hold on. I just read this title. Dave Chappelle, the $600,000 penny lesson that changed my life. And I need a moment, because this is clearly about to be one of those profound Dave Chappelle stories that starts with what seems like a simple anecdote, but ends up being a masterclass in philosophy, values, and what really matters in life. Because that's what Dave does. He tells stories that sound casual, but are actually deeply meaningful lessons about integrity, purpose, and staying true to yourself. First, let's break down what this title is telling us. $600,000 penny lesson. That's a specific number, $600,000, connected to something as small as a penny. That juxtaposition is intentional. That's Dave setting up a contrast between massive money and the tiniest unit of currency. That's him saying, I'm about to tell you a story about a moment where the difference between a huge amount of money and a tiny amount of money taught me something fundamental about life. And it changed my life. Not just influenced him, not just was interesting, changed his life. That's Dave signaling that this isn't just an entertaining story, this is a pivot point. This is one of those moments that altered his trajectory, his thinking, his values, his approach to his career and life. This is the kind of story that explains who Dave Chappelle is and why he makes the decisions he makes. Now, I don't know the specific story yet, but knowing Dave's history, I have theories about what this might be about. And the most obvious possibility relates to the most famous decision of Dave's career: walking away from Comedy Central and the $50 million deal for Chappelle's show. But the title says $600,000, not $50 million. So this might be earlier in his career. This might be a moment that prepared him for the later decision to walk away from massive money when it conflicted with his values. This might be the experience that taught him that some things are more valuable than money. Let me speculate on what this penny lesson might be. Possibility 1. The Comedy Central negotiation. Maybe early in negotiations for Chappelle's show, there was a moment where the network or producers tried to change something small. Something that seemed as insignificant as a penny relative to the overall deal. But Dave recognized it as a matter of principle. And he stood firm on that tiny point, even though it could have cost him the entire $600,000, or whatever the deal was worth at that stage. And that experience taught him that principles matter more than money. preparing him for later walking away from $50 million. Possibility 2. A mentor's lesson. Maybe someone Dave respected told him a story about choosing integrity over money. Maybe that person turned down $600,000 for something, and the lesson was worth more than a penny. But the teaching was that sometimes you have to value something as small as your self-respect, a penny, over something as large as money. The metaphorical penny being your soul, your integrity, your sense of self. Possibility 3. An early career choice. Maybe Dave had an opportunity early in his career to make $600,000 by doing something that compromised his artistic vision or integrity. Maybe playing a demeaning role, maybe doing material he didn't believe in, maybe signing a contract that would have controlled him. And he said no, choosing to keep his artistic freedom, the penny, over the money. And that choice, while scary at the time, opened doors to greater success on his terms. Possibility 4. The value of small things. Maybe this is about Dave learning that the small things, the things that seem as insignificant as a penny, are actually what matter most. Maybe $600,000 represents something big and flashy that he thought he wanted, but a penny represents something simple and authentic that he actually needed. And learning to value the penny over the $600,000 changed how he approached his life and career. Possibility 5. Ownership and control. Maybe this is about learning to value ownership over immediate payment. Maybe someone offered Dave $600,000 for something he created, but keeping ownership, the penny, the small percentage he'd keep, was actually more valuable long-term than the immediate payment. This would align with Dave's later fights for ownership of his work. Any of these possibilities would be classic Dave. Because Dave's career has been defined by making choices that prioritized integrity, ownership, artistic control, and personal values over immediate financial gain. He walked away from $50 million. He left Hollywood. He moved to Ohio. He fought for years to get ownership of Chappelle's show. Every major decision has been about valuing something other than money most highly. Let me talk about why this kind of story matters, especially coming from Dave Chappelle. Dave is one of the most respected comedians alive. Not just funny, respected. Because he's shown again and again that he can't be bought. He can't be controlled. He can't be pressured into compromising his values or his art. That's rare, especially in entertainment where people constantly sell out for money, fame, or approval. So when Dave tells a story about a $600,000 penny lesson, people listen, because Dave has proven through his actions that he values integrity over money. This isn't just talk, he's lived it. He's made decisions that cost him millions to maintain his principles. So his lesson about valuing something small and seemingly insignificant over large amounts of money comes with credibility. This is Dave as teacher, not just entertainer, teacher. He's sharing wisdom earned through experience. He's telling younger comedians, artists, and people in general, here's what I learned. Here's what matters. Here's how you navigate a world that constantly tries to make you compromise yourself for money. Now let me think about the storytelling, because Dave is a master storyteller. He doesn't just state facts, he creates experiences. When Dave tells a story, he sets the scene vividly. You can see the room, the people, the moment. He uses specific details that make it real, builds tension. He creates stakes. You feel the pressure of the decision. Reveals character. Through the story, you understand not just what happened, but who the people involved were and what motivated them. Uses humor. Even serious lessons are delivered with comedy, because that's Dave's medium. The humor makes the medicine go down easier. Delivers the lesson organically. He doesn't hit you over the head with the moral. He lets you discover it through the story. Makes it universal. Specific details, universal applications. His story becomes your story, becomes everyone's story. So when Dave tells this $600,000 penny lesson story, it's not going to be a dry recitation of facts. We're going to laugh. We're going to be surprised. We're going to have realizations. And we're going to walk away changed by what we heard. Let me talk about the timing of this lesson in Dave's life, because that matters too. If this happened early in his career, it was formative. It shaped everything that came after. It gave him the foundation to make later difficult decisions. It taught him who he was and what he valued before the stakes got really high. If this happened later, after some success, it might have been a correction. Maybe Dave had started to chase money or compromise, and this experience reminded him of what really mattered. Maybe it was a wake-up call that redirected his path. Either way, the fact that Dave identifies this as life-changing means it was a pivot point. His life could have gone one way, but because of this lesson it went another way. And given how Dave's life and career have unfolded, the success, the integrity, the respect, the impact, we can assume the direction this lesson pushed him was the right direction. Now let's talk about the broader cultural significance of this kind of story. We live in a culture that prioritizes money above almost everything else. Success is measured in dollars. Worth is measured in net worth. People sacrifice health, relationships, integrity, happiness, all for money. The message from every angle is, get the bag, secure the check, chase the money. And here comes Dave Chappelle saying, I learned a lesson that taught me something is more valuable than $600,000. That's countercultural. That's radical in our current moment. That's saying, actually, there are things that matter more than money, and I'm going to tell you about a time when I learned that lesson. Especially for young people who are being told constantly to monetize everything, to turn every hobby into a hustle, to value themselves based on their earning potential. Dave's story offers an alternative framework. Value yourself based on your integrity, your authenticity, your artistic vision, your peace of mind. I'm also thinking about how this relates to Dave's later decision to walk away from Comedy Central. That's the most famous example of Dave choosing principle over money. He walked away from $50 million because the environment had become toxic, because he felt the show was being misunderstood, because he needed to protect his mental health and artistic integrity. At the time, people thought he was crazy. $50 million? Are you insane? But Dave knew something they didn't. He'd already learned the lesson that some things are worth more than money. The $600,000 penny lesson had taught him that. So when the stakes got even higher, when it was $50 million instead of $600,000, he was prepared to make the hard choice because he'd already made it before in smaller form. That's how principles work. You don't suddenly develop integrity when the stakes are high. You develop it in small moments, in decisions that seem insignificant at the time. And then, when the big test comes, you're ready because you've been practicing. Let me talk about what I hope this lesson is about, because there are bad versions of this story too. Bad version. I was too proud to take a reasonable deal, and it cost me money I should have taken. Good version. I recognized that compromising my values for money would cost me something more valuable than the money, so I walked away. Bad version. I was stubborn about a small thing, and it taught me I should be more flexible. Good version. I stood firm on a principle that seemed small, but was actually foundational, and it taught me the importance of knowing your non-negotiables. Bad version. I learned money doesn't matter, and you should never care about being paid. Good version. I learned that money matters, but isn't the only thing that matters. Sometimes other values have to take priority. I'm betting Dave's lesson is one of the good versions, because Dave isn't anti-money. He's made millions. He's wealthy. He performs for massive fees. But he's shown that money is a tool, not a master. It's something you use to build the life you want, not something you sacrifice everything else to obtain. Now I'm thinking about the audience for this story. Who is Dave telling this to? Young comedians. learn that artistic integrity matters more than getting paid immediately. Build a career on your terms. Artists in any field, don't compromise your vision for money. The right opportunities will come when you stay true to yourself. Business people, understand that reputation, relationships, and integrity have value beyond their monetary worth. Regular people, you don't have to chase money at the expense of everything else. There are other measures of success and other sources of fulfillment. This is Dave using his platform to teach, not just to entertain, though he'll do that too, but to pass on wisdom, to help people avoid mistakes, to give them framework for making difficult decisions, to show them through example that it's possible to succeed without selling your soul. Let me also address the potential criticism of this kind of story. Easy for him to say now that he's rich. Fair point. But the lesson happened before he was rich, presumably. It was a decision made when $600,000 actually mattered. Not everyone can afford to turn down money. Also true. But the lesson isn't never take money. It's know what you're willing to sacrifice for money and what you're not. This is individualistic advice that ignores systemic issues. But personal integrity and systemic critique aren't mutually exclusive. You can fight the system and maintain personal values. It's privilege to prioritize integrity over money, sometimes. But Dave came from working-class background. He understands hustle and necessity. His lesson is presumably more nuanced than money doesn't matter. These criticisms are worth considering, and if Dave is thorough in his storytelling, he probably addresses some of them. Alright, I'm about to watch this video, and I need to know, what exactly is the $600,000 penny lesson? When in Dave's career did this happen? Who else was involved? What was at stake? What decision did Dave make? What were the consequences? How did it change his life? What does he want us to learn from it? This is Dave Chappelle at his best, using personal story to teach universal lessons, combining comedy with philosophy, making us laugh while making us think about what we value and why, showing us through example that integrity, authenticity, and artistic control are worth fighting for, even when it costs you money. I'm ready to learn this lesson. Let's hear what Dave has to teach us about the relationship between money and values, about what really matters, about how to navigate a world that constantly pressures you to compromise.